Hello, interwebs, and welcome to the 7th episode of Conspiracy Synergy. I'm your host, T. Snyder, and as always, thank you for tuning in and for taking the time to delve into relevant controversy and real-world conspiracy. Not theory. Real, actual reality, really real-ass real conspiracy. Okay? Now, generally speaking, when it comes to inquiry into the realm of conspiracy beyond the margins of what is acceptable in society, that's not something most people feel comfortable discussing publicly. And a big part of why that is because, one, the idea that networks of clandestine secret societies rule the world from behind the scenes seems utterly preposterous until you realize that, well, it's completely openly admitted nowadays. It's not secret at all anymore. It's on the record. And the general public just, doesn't want to admit it. And that's a big part of the problem that we're facing. We all think of secret plans to rule the world like Bond villains or cartoon characters or something like that. But the truth is, it's more just groups of really boring bureaucracies and people who have been tricked into doing mundane jobs for those bureaucracies. Now, the second reason it's difficult to understand real-world conspiracy is because most people who have started to look deeply into the world of conspiracy, well, generally speaking, a lot of people kind of suck at explaining what's going on. And that's okay because, again, it's insanely complicated. Okay, now the third reason why real-world conspiracy is so very, very difficult for us to feel able to approach is because not only are global conspiracies extremely complicated, intricate, and spread out across long stretches of time, but a lot of the time, in addition to all of that, they're also really weird. They're like Weird Al levels of weird. Yes, he's very strange, but he still exists in reality. Weirdality is a reality. We can all agree on that. Like, no matter what your political stance is, Weird Al exists. And that's what real conspiracy is like a lot of the time, too. It's very unexpected, very strange, and so weird that it boggles the mind that it's even possible to be as crazy as it actually is. And yet, it is. For an amusing example, before we get into the really heavy geopolitical stuff later on, let's talk about Bigfoot. Okay, hold on. Didn't I just say that the show is about real conspiracy that has been proven definitively, not theory, and now I'm already trying to convince people that Bigfoot is a thing? Really? No. That's not the point I'm making here. I actually don't definitively know if Bigfoot is a thing. I don't know. But there are, say, a number of sightings that have been suggested as being real, yes, and for a long time there was even a dude driving around the United States with a corpse in a freezer that he was charging people to see the frostbitten body of. But ultimately, the reason it wouldn't surprise me if Bigfoot was potentially real is because as big as the idea of Bigfoot is, it's a much, much bigger planet, and for the most part, we still haven't explored it. And yet, for whatever reason, people are under the impression that if Bigfoot was real, we miraculously would have already found him. Just walk out into the expansive, vast, never-ending wilderness, and there he is, just waiting for us to find him. No. My point is, even if we were actively out looking for Bigfoot right now, we probably wouldn't be able to find it. And that's not because Bigfoot has Where's Waldo levels hiding skills. Instead, it's because of just how rare it can be to stumble across what we now consider obvious hidden in the vast wilderness. For a historical example of humanity's track record, scouting out obscure furry critters, let's talk about pandas. What do pandas have to do with Bigfoot? Okay, they don't. They're not okay. Before, pandas were China's most lucrative export. Seriously, zoos have to pay China between $500,000 to $1 million annually simply to have a panda in their possession. Anyway, before that illustrious raccoon racketeering scheme kicked off, pandas are genetically similar to raccoons. They're still technically bears, but like they're cousins. Those are basically just like, those are super cute raccoons. Anyway, before pandas were made into cuddly slave labor for China, they were a mythical creature that only existed in folklore. They were so rare that people disputed their very existence. Occasionally, townsfolk would catch glimpses of them out in the wild, and rumors circulated about strange black and white bears hiding in the forest. And so, to set these rumors to rest, search parties were organized to venture into the jungle and track down these super rare creatures. Do you know how long people had to search for pandas in the giant-ass jungles of China before they actually found one of these little buggers? 60 years. Okay, they kind of gave up for like a few decades in the middle, but still 60 years of not finding a freaking panda that foreigners could lay their hands on and then wear it to the opera. I mean, it's not like they're quick animals, They weren't exactly outrunning us. And yet still, that's how long it took to prove that something very rare and highly elusive existed at all. And do you know how that proof eventually happened? It's actually like the weirdest part of the entire story. Teddy Roosevelt's sons were out on safari, heard some shit up in a tree, shot it, a dead black and white bear fell out of it, and presto, proof of panda. Sometimes, after decades of searching unsuccessfully, a myth can very suddenly become a reality. A weird-ality. For example, platypuses. Okay, how much of this episode am I going to spend talking about like weird animals and stuff? Okay, just like bear raccoon with me here, people. Do you know the story of discovering the world's first platypus? Basically, this weird-ass creature was discovered in Australia, killed, dried after it died, stuffed in a suitcase, and then sent back to Britain for analysis. The scientist who first laid eyes on the remains of this super strange creature struggled to grasp that it was actually real. As far as they were concerned, it was every bit as likely that it was just an elaborate hoax of different dismembered animal parts to appear as if it was one creature. So what am I saying here? Like, because pandas are rare and platypuses are weird, therefore Bigfoot exists? No, I'm using these two examples of discovery as a reminder to everybody about the nature of conspiracy. They're deliberately hidden. Not only are they hard to find, they're actively being covered up as we try and find them out. It's important to remember. Almost like there's a lot of mainstream media sediment that's coming down and burying us under their excrement. We know very, very little about what is definitively and ascertainably real beyond what we have thus far been able to glimpse, if we're lucky. And yet, despite our glaring lack of knowledge, we as a species have a tendency to operate under the assumption that we already know far more than we actually do, and that our governments are telling us the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Even though they lie constantly and create wars to destroy society to try and cover up their lies. And yet, even with this proven trend of being lied to time and time again, people still have a tendency to resist information that contradicts our pre-existing position about more or less everything. And we all do this sort of excuse-making routine even if we don't know something definitively ourselves and we just sort of like heard about it from somebody else. Our emotions create our opinions. We're still under the impression that we can explain what's going on out there, even if we don't definitively know what's out there, but have only heard a simple story. And the most incredible thing about this phenomena of people defining and defending their worldviews is how our feelings, first and foremost, are what keep us from coming to deeper understandings. I wonder why that is, why that same basic attribute of emotional defensiveness surrounding our individual worldviews tends to be so true of so many of us. Why is it so painful and so difficult to revisit our feelings about how we view this world and its many institutions? Actually, come to think of it, I do know why that is. It's a direct consequence of our education system. The compulsory school system and the effects that it has on most children is one of the most deeply sinister ways to influence and insulate people's worldviews while also giving them the illusion that they're receiving a well-rounded education. And when you look into the history of why our schools were created in this particular way, that they continue to exist to this day, it has next to nothing to do with educating and everything to do with indoctrinating. The compulsory school system sources back to the Prussian education system. Prussia, which for a long time was an amalgamation of fussy warlords, later unified under this guy to become Germany. But before that happened, the Prussian brass went through a war with Napoleon. Now, Prussia had a long history of being super badass. They had a professional army, while Napoleon had an underdog army. And yet, Prussia lost a decisive battle to Napoleon. And so the Prussian higher-ups sat down to reflect on what had happened to so embarrass them. And in gazing into the reflection of their most sinister ambitions, they decided that it was the resolve of their own soldiers that was to blame. And so a method of indoctrination was devised that would pummel children of subsequent generations into submission from a very young age and thus teach them to be more effective soldiers and industrial workers later on in life. The Prussian school system wasn't an education at all. It was indoctrination labeled as education so that those who worked in the hierarchy of industry could better use and abuse the population to fill their needs. Today, governments all over the world continue to use the foundational principles of the Prussian school system to allegedly educate our children. Watermelons can become square if grown inside of square molds, and goldfish grow proportionally to the containers they're housed inside. Our understandings of the world is a lot like that. It's a behaviorist fusion between human conditioning and our hardwired tendency to play, mimicking our expectations of the world and the many different roles we see every day. That's what kids do. If they see you doing something, they do it too. People have a de facto tendency to act in accordance with the roles that we have been assigned in life. If you put a Spider-Man costume on someone, they'll be more inclined to mimic web slinging. If you put a suit or an evening gown on someone, they'll, embody that in a certain way as well. And not only that, when you combine uniforms and roles that we play with environments illustrative of a certain kind of behavior, it adds additional layers to how our social psychology can be arranged. It isn't just how we're dressed that determines how we address other people around us. It's also the addresses of the places we go, the geometry of those buildings. Every single detail stacks up in a way in which it affects who we are as people. And the more people that you fuse together under the same color of banner or brand of identity, the less they feel that they are individually responsible for the deeds that transpire. Simply by getting a group of people together, they are more inclined to think the same way and to be more extreme in the views that they share. They behave as if the entity around them. A good example of this comes out of the book The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, in which he cites the measures taken to reduce violent crime in New York in the 80s. The way in which they were able to help cope with that was by removing and cleaning up the graffiti. People became less likely to commit acts of crime themselves. It is these sorts of subtle manipulations of the population at large that cumulatively comes to distort how we identify and how we behave. All of it is fused together and micromanaged by how we feel. That's how populations of individuals are slowly maneuvered and led. The more you dig into it, the more you realize that we are ruled by a corporatocracy using advertising on the surface to distract and seduce us. Even a Princeton study came to this basic conclusion. We are not ultimately governed by our governments or our nation states. Those are only labels that keep us from understanding exploitative systems deeply integrated within our way of life. On the surface, it's crazy to think that things actually work this way anywhere on this earth. But the deeper you dig and the more you venture away from the superficial view that public schools entrained us all to do, the more complicated and intricate our world becomes. So, to briefly encapsulate what we've learned on this show thus far, nepotistic psychopathic a-holes rule the world through vast networks of secret societies, using corporations that we all work for to make us their unknowing slaves. Here we are on the surface, like pawns on a chessboard, and underneath us are secret societies manipulating us through our beliefs and behaviors, which we largely adopted from what was being advertised to us. And so, given that that's the situation we're in, to save the world, we the interwebs will endeavor to enlighten the normies of this world, and thus save the day from the corrupt and immoral parts that we ourselves have learned to play. That's ultimately the only real way to change the situation we're all in. We ourselves need to change our positions. You know what's interesting about the framework of the game of chess? It rests upon the same symbolism that's used within the teachings of Freemasonry. No, Freemasons don't rule the entire world. It's not that simple. But they are one of many different brands and branches of secret societies that all cumulatively come to bear the weight we now carry as their cattle. And history has always, always, always worked like this. From Constantine co-opting the story of Jesus to the Jesuits sucking on Baphomet's saggy tits, history has always worked like this. We just don't understand it because there are three main arteries to these power broker secret societies. There's a lot of other stuff going on too, like holy crap, there's a lot of secret societies out there. But these three branches are the most pronounced channels of historical corruption throughout our long and sordid history of this bullshit happening. Number one is the Anglo-American establishment, which includes the Freemasons within it. Number two is the Vatican Bank, which extends out to include vast networks of organized crime hidden behind the superficial veil of religion. Now, number three is Zionism. Now, in the same way that the Vatican is not illustrative of Christ, Zionism is not illustrative of the Jewish people. The common thread between all these secret society belief systems of manipulating you and me is that they corrupt people and the institutions that we work for super secretly. We don't know that this is going on, remember? And so continuing with the metaphor of the game of chess and using us as pawns is a game of conquest, we the people and everything that we suffer and die for is controlled by secret societies indoctrinating us via subversive means. And so, to understand that our weirdality is actually a lot more messed up than we grew up watching on TV, to do that, we need to read and discern what are called history's receipts. What the shit are history's receipts? They're called books. And if you read enough of history's actual receipts, the ones that are actually grounded in verifiable reality and don't contradict with one another, then we can begin to decode the lies and realize that, well, oh, wouldn't you know it? The same assholes who used to own and control everything still own and control everything today. They just use front organizations, corporations, proxy puppets, criminal cartels, think tanks, and the intelligence apparatus to distract the public on the surface. And not least of all, they tell us lies constantly in the form of very simple stories. And as long as they have some insufferable douchebag with really fluffy hair distracting all of us with how much of a tyrannical, insane piece of crap he can be, well, it works. We waste our energy on fighting the machine rather than simply removing our participation from it and understanding how we ourselves are being played by it. In the age of the interwebs, we need to learn to peer past the volcanic ash and hatred being spewed out of mainstream media's ass. The folks employed to keep us all annoyed. The partisan pirates that encourage us to despise one another rather than love and value each other. And because of this, do you know what all of this means? It means that we're in a turning point of our evolution as a species where we take the reins of our own destiny. What history is, most of all, is a story. One that we've been told as much as we're the ones telling it. We can't change what happened before, but we can better understand what's happening, and by better understanding that, we can change ourselves. Where we fall on the board, what piece of life we choose to play. In our greatest manifestation, we circle the square. We create a new way of being that flows into the future better able to be like water. It's a paradigm shift. True human nature, allowed to develop outside of the box, compels us to create a better world. Like pixels on a screen, changing one at a time until the bigger picture depicts a better world. And the more of us who do it, the faster it comes into being. And so, on the next episode of Conspiracy Synergy, you, me, and all the normies eager to be free from our very sick and exploitative societies will venture into the very depths of the single deepest conspiracy there is to see. The precipice upon which all of this fundamentally exists. The law of life itself, the balance of good and evil, and the hidden key of knowledge that has the power to unlock heaven on this earth. As always, my name is Tis, Teacher of Peace. It's a pleasure to be on this rock with y'all, and I cannot wait to see how we're man. The phone is ringing. I'm not going to be... Okay, well, I can't wait until we're to see... You understand yet? I think that's a package. Well, pretty good timing anyway. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.